Jeg ved ikke med dig, men jeg er ret pjattet med e-sport, og derfor så har jeg lavet et interview med den kære Connor Gervin, a.k.a. Scrawny. Og anden del af det interview, det kan du se lige her.
The waiting game is the way MIBR are going to slip away with this. I mean, at least they'll find the plant. A Molotov down on... Oh, he stopped it! 4, Taco has no time! That's sickening!
But what about like the future of Counter-Strike? Like, you're very reliant on this game still being alive. So like, where do you see Counter-Strike in like 5 or 10 years from now? Do you think it's still as big as it is now, or maybe even bigger?
Man, really tough question. Because I hope, you know, I hope it's just as big, if not bigger. If I'm thinking with my heart, then that's what I have to shoot for, because CS has become my life. It's what I think about, it's what I play, it's what I love. It's given me tons of opportunities professionally, personally. Like, CS is, I can't imagine my life without Counter-Strike nowadays. So, you know, and I've dabbled with Valorant ever so slightly. And I feel like if that passion's not there for a game, it's harder to do what I do.
It's not easy to fake.
No, it's not. It's not at all. And I don't like being fake, you know? Like, I try to keep my passion genuine. Obviously, when the passion becomes your profession, you do have to sometimes just make those decisions and recognize that it is work. But I hope Counter-Strike lasts forever. I think it can, because I think on a base level, on like a mechanical level, they nailed Counter-Strike when they first designed it. The movement, the aiming, the just, it's so raw, right? And that's why I've said it a couple times already, but like repackaging what Counter-Strike already is in a fresh experience is so vital, because it's a chance to draw in new players, and it's a chance to keep your dedicated, you know, player base and fan base. I understand and sympathize with people who don't live CS like I do, that just from a playing perspective, the same maps get boring after years. You know, we're not talking map pool now for months. If you get bored after 6 months, maybe you just don't have the, you know, the thought of mastery. But 2 years, no map changes, that's a long time. I absolutely sympathize with things getting stale. So this is when Valve has to kind of like keep their game fresh and keep drawing people back in. And you know, I mean, at the same time, we have the highest player base now than ever. Counter-Strike's player base is massive, but I think it's both massive and starving, in the sense that a lot of people want new content. And I don't think you don't need to rewrite what Counter-Strike already is to make it work. I think, again, that just amplifying the community that surrounds CS and the community that wants to provide content in terms of maps, updates, game modes, it's all there. It's just a matter of implementing it properly. There's so many things that CS could take from other games to maybe, you know, just continue to keep it at the forefront. But I do think that, like, personally, I can go and play another game for a long time. I remember when Warzone dropped, I really fell back in with Call of Duty, and I hadn't played Call of Duties for years because I was so obsessed with CS. And I had an absolute blast playing this Call of Duty. I think it's really good. But even after like 3 months of playing it daily, that Counter-Strike bug in the back of my head, man, it started whispering to me. And it drew me back in, because nothing hits like CS. You know, I think that a lot of Counter-Strike players identify as Counter-Strike players who can go out and enjoy other games. Some people don't play anything other than CS. And I understand that kind of like diehard fandom as well. But to me, Counter-Strike is that pillar of the FPS experience that everything else just kind of spirals around. And you might go get lost in another world or another franchise, which is completely understandable. There's a lot of great games. But I personally always get drawn back to CS, and I don't think I'm the only one out there. And as long as that continues, you know, what's now been 6 years for me, way longer for some others, right? People have played Counter-Strike for decades at this point. Like, why not another 5, 10 years, right? The thought of like new esports coming in to replace older esports, every time a game gets released, you have to think about the competitive like potential for it, the esports potential. And there's been so many times where like we've heard of the Counter-Strike killer, but Counter-Strike keeps killing it on its own, doing its own thing, even despite what you can argue is like lackluster support. So I don't see a reason for CS to ever go anywhere other than maybe neglect. If it's neglected by its developer, and if it's neglected by its community, then we're in a place where maybe CS starts to fade away. But I absolutely see it lasting forever. Personally, I could play Counter-Strike till the day I die.
Yeah, I very much agree with you. I think my biggest fear would be to have the same thing that kind of like happened when Counter-Strike Source hit, where it was kind of like people preferred 1.6 and it was kind of like this split, where rather than focusing on just one Counter-Strike, you had tournaments in both the old game and the new game at the same time. I think it would be very damaging to the scene to have that kind of like fragmentation happen again should a new Counter-Strike come around with, like if they decide to not do an update, but do an entirely new Counter-Strike based on Source 2, for example. Do you think that Counter-Strike could survive that?
I would hope it. I hope it would. But at the same time, I could definitely see something like that being problematic again, because the thought of Source 2 and a Counter-Strike sounds amazing. The difficulties of implementing Source 2 into CSGO, I mean, I'm not a programmer, but I can imagine that is a headache and a half. There's already a lot of people who talk about like, you know, the messiness of the coding. So whether there is ever a new Counter-Strike released, I think it would have to implement a lot from Go. I feel like it would have to just be like this huge pushover. You know, my mind always falls to like skins, for example. If they release a completely new Counter-Strike, do all of my CSGO skins get brought into this new game? I think they'd have to. We're talking millions of dollars in terms of cosmetic economy. So if they were to undermine that by trying to divide the player base again, that would be very problematic. So I don't know how you would ever do it, but I would hate to see a divide like that. Because I think if, yeah, that's a fair point. I think that if anything would kind of kill momentum in two directions, it would be that. That would be a fork in the road that would just take away a lot of the steam that CS currently has.
Steam. No pun intended.
None at all, man.
So what would you say is like a thing that we should do in order to try and combat player burnout and like...
This is when I think like tournament saturation kind of comes into the conversation. I think there are certain organizers that have a very manageable circuit and very manageable level of games. I think Blast does a great job of it, actually. It was this change from what we had with LANs. We had LANs every single weekend. Sometimes we'd have multiple LANs on the same weekend before kind of COVID cut things down. And the travel is demanding. That's a big one. The time away from home, I think, is a big burner for some players. But when we went back to the online realm, it almost felt like, okay, well, without travel, these guys will get a chance to take a break. And then you had certain organizers just doubling the amount of games they would play because they realized from their perspective that with nobody traveling, you could suddenly have everything best of 3, everything double elimination, everything had a group stage. And there was just simply more maps of Counter-Strike being played. Not only does that take away from time for practice, it adds to the I would say like the redundancy of some matchups. You know, if you're casting the same two teams playing each other for the 10th time in a year, everybody's level of interest is just kind of that much less. So I think that what would have helped back then was just kind of letting the foot off the pedal a little bit, letting CS breathe, not trying to pump up your streaming numbers in terms of like a tournament broadcast. But I also understand from their perspective why it happened. It's just definitely not at the benefit of the production staff, the broadcast talent, or the players. That was just a lot of CS. And yes, okay, you can just roll out of bed, turn on your computer and play, theoretically, but that's not the reality of what these guys do. You know, you gotta warm up daily before your matches. You've got practice somewhere sprinkled in between. And if there's not even a day between events now, because from one online broadcast to the next online broadcast, nobody's moving space. They're just doing more of the same. Then I think it kind of detracted from what could have been a really good breather. And that's on TOs, you know, certain TOs. Other ones do want their product to feel more prestigious and therefore don't want to shove it down your throat constantly 12 months out of the year. But it's, you know, it's a very competitive space, so everybody's going to serve their own interests. And it depends on what philosophy you kind of subscribe to, right? Like, do you want less games but build them up in terms of storylines? Or do you want more of the calendar across the year so that your product seems to be the most important or the most constant? But I think what would help players was just the chance to play less and practice more. Because then if you're playing less and practicing more, when you finally get a chance to knock down your opponent in the server, you're that much more hungry, you're that much more sharp.
But it seems like tournament organizers haven't been really good at like self-regulating the amount of events and stuff like that. What would be like a good way of regulating the amount of events? Would that be something like CSPPA, or would it be something else that would like be a good way of regulating the amount of events? I
think ideally there would just be communication between events, that the tournament organizers would all come to an agreement between themselves to kind of, you know, put a limit on things. But that's not going to happen. There was this ideal period where it felt like maybe everybody would work together, but I think that's out the window. I don't know why. I'm not privy to those kinds of conversations, right? As a freelance broadcast talent, I'm just here to put on the show and to get the people pumped. Whether it's done by the CSPPA, I think that's giving power to an organization that not everybody would agree with should have that kind of power over TOs. I could see the teams doing it, right? Towards 2019, 2020, we saw Astralis start skipping some events to give their players a chance to play at less events. And we saw that with mixed results. You know, at first it kind of looked good, but then they started getting flack for skipping out other big lands, and then that had this community feedback that lashed onto their, you know, their mental stance. So that's a hard question. I don't know who I'd give that power to. It's a lot of power to decide who, what, and when CS can happen. Yeah, I don't really have a clean answer for that one.
Let's take another question from one of the peeps. This is your good friend Joey, who you're playing a lot of Danish with.
Yeah.
On is it Heliumbrella?
Heliumbrella, yeah. Twitch.tv/Heliumbrella.
A nice little shout out there.
Hey Connor, I know you love to make a ton of weird noises and voices when we stream together, so I was wondering if you could lend your voice to any other video game franchise, what would it be?
Now, that's a good question. I think that if I ever stopped casting, I would try to be a voice actor. There's a lot of characters that live in my head. You know, like I feel like sometimes a bit like a human soundboard. I'm very animated and I can get kind of loud. So if I had to lend my voice to a different game franchise, I would want it to be something like Lord of the Rings. I would love to voice some ghouls and goblins from Lord of the Rings, man. Some real gritty characters, or like a World of Warcraft where we start getting into those mythical lands of Azeroth. Yeah, but Lord of the Rings specifically.
So something very fantasy themed.
Yeah, yeah. I remember in Copenhagen 2019, I came here for Blast, and it was Halloween on that weekend. And I went out and I bought a very nice, like, movie prop quality orc mask. Because I've always wanted to, yeah, you remember this. Yeah, so I've always wanted to, like, you know, I'm not into cosplaying myself, but I respect it for what it is. I think it's cool when you bring video game world to life. I've always wanted like a head-to-toe, top-of-the-line orc costume. Some kind of ghoulish, gremlin-y, goblin-y looking thing. When I used to play Magic the Gathering, I was always playing goblin decks. I feel like a goblin, but like a relatively friendly one, you know?
You're a friendly neighborhood goblin.
Yeah, exactly.
Not one of the ones to like tear your face off.
Well, yeah, when the time comes, man. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds a little intense.
You remembered the goblin mask, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
that
cool.
was crazy.
Yeah, I played Counter-Strike in it, and it didn't go well. Yeah.
Doesn't it kind of like restrict your view a little bit?
Entirely, yeah. It's also really hot in there.
So there's obviously not been a lot of travel with Blast recently.
Yeah.
So if you could pick like any country and any city in the world, where would you bring Blast to? For like a big arena event?
For a big arena event? I think it would be really cool to bring Counter-Strike and Blast and all of that jazz to like Tokyo.
I very much agree.
Or we head to like South Korea. You know, I've done lots of events in Europe, and I'm happy with, I love Europe. I love traveling here. It's always a pleasant experience. I'm a little biased in the sense that like I would also love to go home. You know, I would love to bring everybody from Blast to Montreal and do an awesome event, Justice in Canada, maybe in the summer when it's, you know, pleasant weather.
Not cold.
Yeah. So either home where the heart is, because I could also then just bring all my non-esports friends and like show them my world. But I think for everybody at Blast's best interest and not like the egotistical answer, dude, we've got to take it to Japan or to Korea. I think the crowds would be awesome, and it would just be really nice to visit. Yeah.
That's very
Agreed?
true.
Yeah.
Lots more sushi.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. I was like, that's why Leonard's all on board.
Yeah. I've just never really been over there.
Same, yeah.
It would be really crazy to try.
Yeah, I've been to Taiwan once, Hong Kong once, and Shanghai for about 48 hours. But outside of that, man, you know, Counter-Strike doesn't bring us that direction, I think, often enough, sadly.
Could also be nice to get back to like Lisbon or Madrid.
Yes, yeah, I
or
think, yeah.
Istanbul.
Lisbon, man, gets a huge shout out. Like when we did LAN event there, that was an impeccable event. And again, a great like travel destination. So Portugal definitely earned a spot in my heart after that event, big time.
And Sao Paulo was great.
Yep, that's true. The Brazilians are passionate, and that made for a really fun event. Istanbul too, I think was like low key. Because it was at the beginning of the year, I think it ultimately got like kind of put in the shadows compared to like the Lisbon. But Turkey is really cool, and the Istanbul crowd was fun. So all the spots that Blast has been, I feel like have been pretty top tier.
Maybe Italy.
Maybe Italy. Yeah, sure. Never been.
It could be. I don't think I've ever been there. Yeah, no, never.
Same.
Could be cool.
Anywhere else, Leonard? What's your list?
Texas, maybe.
Okay.
Just
all right.
for
yeah, take it back, eh? Take it back to America.
I don't know. Asia would be really cool.
I think Japan's up there, man. It's got to be.
Do you think there's like possibilities of growing a bigger CS scene in the Asian region, and maybe even like the oceanic, like Australia, kind of parts of the neck of the woods?
I think Australia deserves more events, right? Like they actually do have like a good notch in Counter-Strike history, and they have some incredible crowds. Like anytime IEM Sydney comes around, that's an event worth watching just for the crowds themselves. And I think that there's an Australian, like, honestly, the Australian broadcast talent for CSGO doesn't get enough credit. There's more than a handful of guys down there that do really great work, and just because of where they live, it's hard for them to travel outwards and get chances. And they make a great product for their event specifically, and you know, Sydney always gives them a good chance to grow that platform. But I think Blast should take it there too, and maybe give them a shot.
And give Blast a major, maybe.
Yeah, sure, let's do it. Yeah, I'm all aboard. Yeah.
Not biased at all here.
Not at all. Never.
Det var så anden del af mit interview med Scrawny. Jeg håber, du kan lide det, og fortælle mig, hvad er dine erfaringer med e-sport? Skriv en kommentar som altid herunder, og så håber jeg bare, at du vil have det så dejligt, til vi ses igen. Måske endda i sidste afsnit.